An unmet need may be financial stability, intimacy, right? Intimacy is like a huge need. I don't know if a lot of us are getting a whole lot. Outdoor activities, time spent in nature, spiritual exploration and learning, exercise. This can include things like strength training, mobility training, flexibility, endurance.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited. I'm always excited to have back on our most popular guest, Dr. Chanu Dasari. And I'm very excited to speak with him about a number of topics that we have not discussed yet. And he's doing amazing things. His YouTube channel is taking off. His online courses that help people recover from autoimmune diseases are just absolutely crushing it and taking off and helping thousands or hundreds of people, soon to be thousands of people through the course. He's already helped hundreds or maybe thousands of people through his clinical practice and surgeries and things that he's been doing. So he is someone who is a gut health doctor, a surgeon, but I look at him as one of the most holistic doctors, one of the most kind of in touch, in tune, someone who's not just prescribing things or doing what he learned from med school and this is the symptom, so therefore we got to do surgery or whatever it is. He actually, even though he could potentially make more money in a surgery, he turns down surgeries and gives people other alternatives because he would rather them not have to do surgery unless it's an absolute last resort. So I really commend you for everything you're doing and really excited to get into this conversation here today.
Thanks again, Talor. At this rate, I need to start co-hosting this podcast with you.
That's it, man. Let's do it. I would love to. I would absolutely love to. I think we've discussed it. So let's see if we can get it going consistently here, man. I'd love to chat about it. We always have great conversations. So let's, we were briefly, before we started recording, we were briefly talking about the differences between kind of like traditional medical doctors versus health coaches or doctors who are providing more kind of health coaching advice, kind of similar, I would guess, to like what you do, and the traditional doctors and how they think and how they go about things. And we're not here to knock, that traditional doctor, the way they do things, right? They've obviously provided a lot of value, and you've lived that life and done that as well yourself. So, but just want to kind of touch on what are some of the differences that you've seen personally.
Yeah, this last, several years has been a really eye-opening experience for me. I'm a fairly busy surgeon, and if you come to me on my surgery clinic days, so to speak, these are days where I just see surgery patients through insurance. This would be what you would consider a traditional healthcare model. The visits are usually anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. We're only talking about one isolated topic. We're getting diagnostic tests to just basically rule in or rule out life-threatening disease that may or may not require surgery, and that's it. There's not a whole lot, and there's obviously a little bit of counseling regarding the risks of surgery, things like that, and maybe a discussion of alternatives. But what ends up happening is in a normal clinic setting, you're seeing anywhere from 10, 15, 20, sometimes upward of 40, 50 patients. And you see them, every 2-3 months, only for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's really hard. It's really hard in those settings to have quality, long-lasting interactions with people where you can actually go into what are the root causes of what you're dealing with? How do we fix those root causes? Even after describing how you fix them, there's a coaching element, right? Like trying to get people successfully through that learning curve. It's not something that traditional clinics are equipped to do. I certainly am not equipped to do it in my surgery clinic, right? I try my hardest, right? I try, but that's why in the last several years, I've sort of shifted the focus of my practice to offer a, more of a concierge, holistic approach to patients that want it. Because of the people that see me, probably, a quarter of them are like, hey, I really have this issue and I want to find out what the underlying cause is. I want to fix it. what is it going to take to do that? And so for those people, I offer another alternative or another option, basically, to work with me directly without all the insurance middleman, without the without the waiting rooms, without the restriction of having only 15-minute visits. And I really get them to the point of like true recovery. You know what I mean? Not like this idea of like we'll put a patch on it or we'll treat it with a medication. I'm talking about true recovery in the sense that you're not going to have to deal with medications. You're not going to have to deal with ongoing symptoms. You're not going to have to deal with, trying to find a Band-Aid, so to speak. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think a lot of people, at least the ones that I work with, are very happy. They're stunned that this is even an option, because traditional healthcare settings, they can be kind of depersonalized, and people are there's definitely a discontent among patients who see a doctor or physician or nurse practitioner wanting to get health advice, but what they're getting is sort of a limited slice of what they really want.
Right, right, and that's also assuming that these doctors are even really trained in things that I know, gone above and beyond medical school to learn and train yourself in different things, such as the mind-body connection and trauma and that people have gone through, and unmet needs and fulfillment in people's lives that could be affecting. Again, it's not something that's really talked about a whole lot, but with autoimmune diseases, right? I think there's obviously, I think with everything there is a physical part of it for sure, and that's where you go to work on, with your different probiotics that you advise people to take and different foods that you have them eat. But there's also kind of the mental aspect where I don't know very many. And again, like you said, when doctors have people in the waiting room and they got to see one person after the next, they don't have time to do a counseling session. Nor are many of them even qualified potentially to do so. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I ask patients a simple question. When is the last time a physician has asked you about your diet? When have they asked you about your stress, your sleep, your supplements? Do they even know what to do with the supplements or how to optimize them? Most physicians I know don't have any training. I certainly got no training about really, performance-based nutrition, supplementation, how to successfully coach people through trauma, stress, anxiety, negative emotions. And prominent physicians, this is out in the published literature, right? Prominent physicians and authors estimate that trauma accounts for more than 80% of chronic inflammation. And that includes
Wow.
digestive dysfunction, immune inflammation, and emotional stress. So basically you have trauma leading to stress, leading to inflammation, leading to gut microbiome dysfunction and autoimmunity. And there are some studies that predict nearly a 700% increase in the incidence of certain autoimmune diseases in individuals that have experienced trauma in their lives. And that's a lot. This has correlations to life expectancy. It's more important than genetics as a cause of inflammation.
Wow.
And to think that this is a topic that most physicians don't even talk about. We're not even covering it. We don't even screen for this, right? And it's affecting people's lives. And so for me, in order to fix the root causes of issues, I've dedicated part of my practice to understanding and eliciting and creating awareness of these issues in my patients so that they can get rapid results. We're not talking about, over years' time. I'm talking about in weeks' time, right? Creating these sort of, systems and creating not shortcuts, but I would say like creating a reliable methodology to heighten awareness of these issues in a short period of time, I think has tremendous amount of value.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned before we recorded, did you mention you have tons of hours and hours on this part of things in your courses now, or in your training that you're giving?
Yeah, so we have, since in the last year, we've actually created a trauma awareness module within the Mind Gut Immunity Clinic. And this module, it goes, I mean, and I'll cover some of the specifics here today if you want, but it goes into what people's unmet needs are, and it really explores that topic to the point where it's we have like an 8 question exercise that you can literally just go through, and after going through that exercise you realize, oh my god, like I've got this entire list of unmet needs. I'm spending more than 50% of my day doing other stuff other than that, and then it kind of goes into the reasons why, and then literally within, like, I don't know, like just a few minutes of doing that, it creates an awareness. And then we have a dedicated coach that's an awareness coach that works with all of our members. And it's like a mandatory thing. You got to work with them because, when we're dealing with autoimmune disease, when we're dealing with digestive dysfunction, it's one of the root causes of these problems, right? So I make it mandatory that you meet with the awareness coach, my awareness. It's the same one I use. Okay. So this awareness coach works with me, my history with autoimmune and digestive dysfunction. So it's the same one that's worked with me. And I have everyone work with her because I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that, and people it doesn't require going into like long drawn out discussions about your deepest, darkest secrets with, like that's what therapy is, right? That's not what this is. This is awareness coaching. You get results fast, and you can get it in a short period of time.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. And I've done a lot of that myself as well. And I remember when I had my pain and inflammation in my arms, I also had, at the time, it was a TMS certified coach from Dr. John Sarno, but which was also
Right.
a lot about the mind body connection. And that was actually very beneficial as well. So we were just talking, you and I both, how we both have coaches. I currently have 2 coaches. I think you have at least 1 coach.
Yeah.
And we're constantly working on this stuff because we know the value and importance of this. Also, so by the way, before we forget, I do want people plug what's your website and like the courses, and are you still doing free one-on-one kind of introductory calls with people right now or no?
Oh yeah, so this is great. It's a very hands-on process right now. I don't know how long this will be sustained, but I get a lot of fulfillment out of working with my clients directly. So the website is mgiclinic.com. MGI stands for Mind Gut Immunity. So Mind Gut Immunity Clinic, mgiclinic.com. And on there, we look at basically the most prominent autoimmune conditions and conditions related to digestive dysfunction. So examples would be lupus, rheumatoid, Sjogren's, mixed connective tissue disorder. We even look at fatty liver disease, which is a hot topic right now. IBS, which is irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel as well, so Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. And we even have folks that are signing up for multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, and eczema. And everyone that signs up has this goal of fixing their symptoms and fixing the underlying cause of their inflammation, which, as you know, 70 to 80% of the immune system is in the gut. So anytime you have inflammation or an autoimmune process, chances are there's some issue related to the gut, and specifically related to gut microbiome dysfunction. And we have an entire way of fixing that in a pretty short period of time, and we have a very good success rate. And these are folks that really want to avoid using medications. Maybe they want to decrease their symptoms. Maybe they're not getting control from their typical medication doses. I know even in my inflammatory bowel disease patients, sometimes the medications stop working, right? So there's a lot of different motivations for why people want this education, why they want this coaching. And overall, it's been a very good thing for their recovery. And people see results. Like I've got tons of folks in my clinic that are off medications, symptom free in about 6 weeks. And it seems to be the rule rather than the exception. Turns out, if you deal with all of the risk factors that led to your disease and you deal with them appropriately, the disease goes away, and I, as a surgeon, I used to operate on these patients. I specialize in intestinal disease, right? So I'm an intestinal disease surgeon. These folks used to, these are the ones that have failed the gastroenterologist, they fail the internal medicine docs, they fail their medications. I'm usually the 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th doctor involved in their care. And so, because by the time you get to a surgeon, something's really bad, right? And then I try to unwind and try to understand how they got to this point. And it turns out 100% of these people have had no counseling about diet, have had no counseling on supplements, have had no coaching on how to optimize their trauma, their stress, their anxiety, their negative emotions. Sleep is a huge component. So there's an exercise, and there's a huge need for this, I think. And that's what our clinic is entirely focused on. I do face-to-face discovery calls with folks if they want to learn more. And it's a really nice way to sort of see a different side of medicine.
That's amazing. So at mgiclinic.com, people can schedule as of right now, they can schedule a free kind of one-on-one Zoom call with you.
Yeah, I think there's a small sum, about $50 right now, but then you can hear about, I'll explain the entire program in depth. I'll even go into some hyper specific detail that might help you. People get a tremendous amount of value from it. And yeah, and then you get an opportunity to join the clinic, which is phenomenal.
Amazing, amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the trauma stuff that you were talking about, and some of these psychological things that people are dealing with. What are some of the common things that you're seeing across your patients?
Yeah, and let me just back up a little bit. The word trauma it can cause, it's very triggering. Okay, because a lot of people, like, I just got in a discussion with my anesthesiologist 2 days ago. I was talking about, we got on this topic of trauma and how I do awareness work in myself and my patients. And he's like, oh, don't all of us have trauma, or none of us have trauma? I mean, the things you're calling trauma are so insignificant, right? And it's like this, that seems to be the default, is to just write it off like trauma can't be that bad. I wasn't abused. I wasn't a victim of neglect. But really, there should be an understanding that there's really two types of trauma, right? There's the capital T trauma. That's trauma with a capital T. This is a type of trauma that includes things like neglect, extreme poverty, racism, bullying, sexual abuse, death of a family member, emotional or physical abuse, medical trauma, or divorce, right? This is big T, capital T trauma. And here you have an automatic response and a mind-body adaptation to a specific, identifiable, hurtful, and overwhelming life event, right? This can occur in childhood or even adulthood, right? And then you have, on the other hand, you have small t trauma. And these are the more subtle, less memorable, seemingly ordinary events. Maybe it was the way you were raised, including your cultural beliefs or what your parents valued. So trauma with a lowercase t is fundamentally, it's a disconnect from yourself, even in the absence of overt abuse or overwhelming threat. It can come from sorts of emotional connections you have with the people around you. And this type of trauma, to be honest with you, affects nearly everyone. And like, let me give you an example, right? Most kids are praised for good behavior, right? And they're shunned for bad behavior. So what that teaches the child is that they're loved only when they're doing good, and they're not as loved, maybe, when they express negative emotions or behaviors, right? Or maybe as a child, you were rewarded with more attention when we were happy and doing things that impressed our parents. But when we were misbehaving or crying or expressing rebellion or negative emotions, our parents neglected us, punished us, guilted us, shamed us, whatever the case may be. Okay. This is very common, by the way. This is very common. And what does that look like later on, right? We grow up in a materialistic, capitalistic society, which means we work all day long just to afford to buy things. And then we focus a lot of energy and attention on gaining resources. And we praise this type of workaholic hustle mentality, right? Let me give you another example. Maybe we were raised not to offend other people, to be polite, to be encouraged to fulfill our duty or obligations, or not let other people down. This can include family members, friends, coworkers, social acquaintances. So what we invariably create are people that don't really want to be doing the things that they're doing, right? Like people pleasing. And this can lead to like weird relationship dynamics, spending all of our time at work functions, social obligations, and fulfilling family obligations. And we actually feel bad. We feel bad if we don't do these things, and we perceive a negative consequence will result from it. But in reality, this is a reflection of the disconnect that we have from ourselves. Our
Mm,
internalized perspective is that we're not deserving or worthy of love when we elicit a negative emotion from others. When we
mm.
should be saying to ourselves, we're deserving of love regardless, and should never ignore our actual needs and desires. We should not be deprioritizing our stuff or ourselves this much. And we really need to know what our genuine needs are. We don't even know that, you know? And we become so disconnected from our true selves that we lose perspective.
Yeah. Wow. That's really good stuff, man. I'm a big believer in that. I'm all about that. Um, in terms of what we're seeing, like with your patients, how are you helping them then to like, I guess you're trying to identify, and it's funny you mentioned, because like me too, like I'm like, oh, I grew up in New York, like, whatever, like, oh yeah, trauma, I don't have any trauma, fine, whatever. And then it's like, oh, actually, a little over a year ago, my brother passed away and I've thought about him every single day since then.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's
And we
little
talked about
things
that.
like that.
Mhm.
What's that?
And we talked about that, right? How
Yeah.
important it was to give time for those feelings, right?
Right, right, exactly. There are other people also that are neglecting certain areas of their life, right? And then, some people are focusing so much on work, right? One thing we always say is a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person has only one. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, one of the goals of this podcast, right? Literally, actually, on every email that we send out, the header is the Peak Performance mission is to help people to inspire people to transform and prioritize their health, right? Literally prioritizing it, making it the number one thing. Now that includes physical health and also includes mental health. Me
Mm-hmm.
personally, when I had all this pain and inflammation in my body, all I cared about was working and making money, and like I have to provide for my family, and I have to get out of debt and provide for my family, and do this and do that, and like all this internal stress that I was feeling, right? Whereas now it's like how many hours am I supposed to be working on a computer? I can't be on a computer 10 hours a day. That's crazy, right? Like I gotta,
Mm-hmm.
I have to have, more balance in my mind, my body, focusing on my health, focusing on my mental health, right? So, and that's why for me, going to the gym, even if I don't feel like going, and I go and start walking for 30 to 40 minutes on a treadmill, listening to my audiobooks and podcasts, which are mostly about personal development related, things, and then doing my workout, like, I don't have any problem spending a long time in the gym for, to break up my day. Now, other people don't need to, and you may have a job, you may not be able to do exactly that. But what makes you feel good? Going to the gym and listening to audiobooks and podcasts makes me feel great. For my mental health, it's amazing. I'm more productive. The days that I don't go to the gym, you would think, oh, you have another hour and a half to 2 hours that you're working those days, so you must get a lot more done. I actually find that I get less done. My mental energy is not there. My motivation and desire is not there. So this is so important that people be taking care of themselves. And so, yeah, I'm curious if you have any other thoughts or ideas around that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, your story is my story, right? When I was dealing with autoimmune disease, when I was dealing with digestive dysfunction, I was working crazy hours, right? And just, poor nutrition, didn't really care for my own body. And you've touched on a very important topic, and this is this topic of unmet needs, right? Once
Mm-hmm.
Talor or once Chanu recognized what our unmet needs were, right? And then we somehow reprioritized our day, our time, really, and we're able to fulfill not necessarily all of the unmet needs, but maybe more of them, right? Suddenly we started to see a lot of positive changes in our life, right? Our relationships improved, our productivity improved, our health improved, right? So you're seeing these improvements in every spectrum or in any little aspect of your life across the whole spectrum, right? So it's important to recognize that this idea of unmet needs, it doesn't in your head it may be a trade-off, right, to prioritize these things, but really in the reality of it is that it's not a trade-off. It actually ends up being a win-win, right? For example, you're more productive, you're more healthy, you can do more now that you have prioritized your health, taking time for yourself in the gym, and improving, just even getting your mindset shifts and your proper nutrition and things like that. So yeah. So one of the exercises we do, we have a series of exercises to try to increase this same awareness, right? Like for us, it sort of happened by accident, so to speak, or by necessity, depending on how you want to talk about it. But is there a way to teach this process to perhaps people that are not aware, right? That was a question that I wanted to answer. And could you do it in a short enough period of time to see results fast? And we set out to answer this question, and the answer, and I'll just tell you, the answer is an overwhelmingly yes, right? The answer is yes. And it's not through this sort of in-depth therapy or anything like that. It's really just focusing on these high-yield exercises that you can do to try to figure out like what some of these things are, right? And I'm going to share a couple of them with you right now, right? So one of the first exercises we do is we say, hey, let's start by making a list of your unmet needs. Okay. And the reason for this exercise is to highlight the parts of you that you are ignoring on a regular basis. So let me provide some examples, right? An unmet need may be financial stability, intimacy, right? Intimacy is like a huge need. I don't know if a lot of us are getting a whole lot. Outdoor activities, time spent in nature, spiritual exploration and learning. Exercise. This can include things like strength training, mobility training, flexibility, endurance, nutrition, nourishment, healthy eating, self-care, which can also include hygiene or medical stuff. Okay. How about rest? How many people are just feeling exhausted and one of their unmet needs is just rest or even personal time? I found a really common unmet need is creative expression. And people don't even think of this as being like a thing, right? Like people are like, well, we're adults, we're got to do our jobs. But creative expression can include things like audio, visual, culinary, right? Culinary expression. Artistic consumption and entertainment. And the reason I say this is a lot of people may just drown out the noise by turning on a TV. But sometimes if you ask them, hey, do you have an unmet need for like true artistic consumption, like things that really excite them? A lot of people will answer yes. And then the other unmet needs can sometimes be communication and understanding. And I say this because maybe our primary relationships or even like our social relationships may not be as rich or as powerful as they could be, but we don't even have time to nurture these types of conversations and these interactions. And so they end up deteriorating or they end up becoming a little bit less satisfactory. And this can be an unmet need.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thing I'll add to that that's been extremely beneficial to me is thinking time, quiet time, right? Mm-hmm. Really just every morning, the last thing I want to do is turn on my phone and get into work right away, things like that, right? So having that time in the morning where I go outside with my cup of coffee, get some sunlight, gratitude, visualization, right? Thinking about what's really most important to me in my life, right? And so when for me, when I look at, okay, if I only achieved one goal and nothing else mattered, what would it be? And it's like, oh, well, if my wife, my daughters, my mom, my family lives to over 100 years old, as living a happy, healthy lives as a close-knit family bond, family unit. If I achieve that, nothing else matters really. Like everything else is completely secondary. So then with that in mind, and by the way, I would never come to this realization if I just woke up and turned on the news or went on my phone or started working or whatever, right? So these things take time. Thinking about what is it you really want, right? When in previous jobs, I think I've told the story one time where when I was, years ago when I was a consultant and I was still trying to get out of debt, and I had one client that was 2/3 of my income, but they were sucking up all my time and wanting more of my time. And I said to myself, okay, hold on, let me do my thinking time. What is my actual goal? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want to achieve? And it's like, working with this client is the opposite of what I want. And so I actually ended up firing that client, letting go of that client, which was 2/3 of my income at a time when I was still trying to, I think, get out of debt and had 2 young kids and everything. And I made that decision because because of the thinking time and realizing what is my unmet need, right? What do I really want? And so by making that difficult decision, which I would never have done if I was just in my head, focused on things, focused on doing, right? And so, and as soon as that client went away, by the way, all these other opportunities opened up. I started my own first business that was a big success, and all this sort of thing. So things just open up. And so I think the power and the value of that quiet time and having that space to think. And I've heard so many very successful people as well talk about this, that the secret to their success is not working harder, right? Obviously you have to do some work, but, and we're talking from a business perspective, right? But especially thinking more, right? What are the most important decisions and unmet needs and things that you want to do in your life, or things of that nature, right? Maybe it's your relationship that's been suffering, that now you through this quiet time, you realize, hey, you know what? I need to put more work and more emphasis on this relationship. Maybe we can get a relationship coach or take a relationship seminar together or do something like that. So these are things that I'm constantly creating the space to think about, and just ideas come into my mind and things happen, and I just feel so much better from doing that.
Yeah, and it's an important thing that everyone should be doing, right? Everyone should be doing this. It's an ongoing process. You're not going to get it right away, but at least opening your eyes to the possibility that things can be better, and you can feel more fulfilled. Just having that open mind can lead you to down the path that you're meant to be on. And when you're on that path, like you said, when you're on that path where you're meant to be and things are sort of, you're sort of like you're in the energy flow, so to speak, right? You get all these opportunities. A lot of these things are, and doors just open up and things just happen for you. And part of that is having faith, right? Having a strong faith that things will be okay, not living life in fear, right? Because fear, as you know, is, the devil preys on fear, right? So it's just how we make crappy decisions when it's based out of fear. Fear of not making enough money leads us to work more, or leads us to deal with a crappy boss, or leads us, there's a lot of stuff, right, along those lines. But really, if you have faith in your own ability, faith in what you know, it might create a lot of other opportunities outside of that. And I'll just say this: having talked to thousands of patients at this point, people spend the majority of their time doing things that don't fulfill their unmet needs. Okay. And so, like, let me give you an example. That there's interaction with people who they don't deeply care for. That's like a lot of people do that. Okay. A lot of people are pursuing material wealth or success. They're seeking notoriety, authority, praise. They may have an overly an over concern for their outward appearance. They're constantly like buying new clothes or makeup or whatever. Maybe they're eating foods that don't nourish them. Maybe they're overeating or undereating. Maybe they're taking on additional obligations or responsibilities. Another big one is actually caregiving. Caregiving for people, it can include like children, parents, spouses, even. Okay. Unfulfilling entertainment, passive recreation activities. These are what people spend the most amount of. They spend a ton of time doing this. I would in our, when we do these exercises with folks, it's greater than 90% of their waking hours, in fact.
Wow.
And these are people that have autoimmune disease or digestive dysfunction or a combination of both, right? They have chronic inflammation. And if you ask these questions though to like most people who don't have those problems will still tell you that these are major issues, or these are significant issues in their life, So it's important to sort of pray about it and have an introspection and give yourself time to think about these things so that you can increase your awareness and then make some changes.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that is something I think about a lot and has helped me a lot mentally, there's a lot of resentment, and people, for example, people who haven't spoken to a family member in years or things of that nature, right? This type of resentment or this kind of holding on to these, some sort of anger or argument that you had years ago, and people are still holding on to it, or people can't forgive their parents or their, ex-spouse or whatever it is for a certain thing or whatever it is. And for me, one framework that has been really life-changing for me that I try to always keep in mind is that people are doing the best that they can with the tools that they have, with the upbringing that they had, right? If people who are resentful of their parents and why did they treat me like that, or why did this and that, right? It was funny because years ago I had a coach, and he used to say to clients, and even said to me one time something like, well, what's worse, the fact that that happened, or the fact that you've been holding on to it and thinking about it for the last 10 years or whatever, right? Like sometimes these are just minuscule things, and sometimes they're misunderstandings that if you just, opened up about it and talk about it, both sides would probably apologize and get back on a great footing. And I think things like that are important. So keep in mind, people are doing the best they can with the tools they have, with the upbringing they had. If you were brought up with the same parents in the same life, however many years ago as your parents were, you have to think like, I would be the same way if I had all those same experiences and lived that same life, right? So people are doing the best they can with the tools they have. And so when you understand that, then it's not like, oh, this person's a jerk, or how could they do that, or blah, 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 blah. It's like and it's just like, oh, okay, like, that's they're doing their best. And maybe if I was in that situation and went through that trauma that they went through, maybe I have to assume that I would be the same way. And so when you can do that, when you can have that framework, it really helps you forgive, right, a lot more. And I think forgiveness, you're not forgiving for the other person, you're forgiving for yourself. If we're actually looking for a motive behind this, right, you're forgiving for yourself to let go of this and to move on. And so I think the more that people can forgive and have that understanding, I think that's a big thing that I've seen in terms of trauma for many people as well.
Yeah, there's even forgiveness of yourself. There's a lot of self-blame.
Yeah.
There's even a lot of, even within primary relationships, within a household, there can be resentment, right? And a lot of these things, both sides are affected by this, right? As you've said, right? It affects not only your mental health, but also your physical health, as we've seen in thousands of patients, over the years. But there's a lot to be gained from this inner work. There's a lot to be gained from this personal development, this awareness work that we do. And it even goes back, like there's even some really prominent authors that talk about doing inner child work. But really what that is, like if you had to summarize and boil it down, is getting in touch with your feelings about something, being okay with those feelings, being okay that other people may have their own feelings and that they don't necessarily need to be judged for those feelings, and to and ultimately to find some kind of resolution that is helpful to you, really.
Yep.
What I've found a really good exercise that I have found helpful in my clinic is, maybe, once you've made, these people make a list of all the things that they do out of obligation or burden, right? And then they estimate the number of hours that they spend on these activities, right? And then they brainstorm, right? They brainstorm ways that they can possibly limit the time that they spend on these activities, right? And the reason for this, it's interesting, right? Like we just talked about creating space, right? Creating space for self-exploration, creating space for forgiveness, creating space for critical thinking, personal development. Well, how do you create space? You need time, right? And if your time is being spent on all of these things that clearly don't do those things, the step that, the exercise that we put people through is like, think of ways that you can spend less time doing those things, right? Maybe like, let's say you have a job or a business to earn money, right? Stressful, long hours, responsibilities. Is it possible to work fewer hours, take a few days off, maybe find a new job, more pay, fewer responsibilities, right? The quiet quitting guys.
Yep.
Remote work options, right? Can you utilize breaks, other income streams? Here's another one. Can you just deal with less pay? How much do you really need? Can you cut expenses, And And, and there's a list of them, right? Like some people say, I have a bunch of like family or caregiving obligations. So can that person you're caregiving for, can they take care of themselves partially, maybe fully? What would that look like? What would it look like if you brought other people in to take on some responsibilities, whether it be family or hired help? A lot of people struggle with anxiety and depression. Well, is it affecting your sleep, your eating habits, your recreational planning? Would you be more fulfilled if you met more of your unmet needs? Some people have physical limitations, right? So, they're in a wheelchair or whatnot. And, are there ways to fulfill some of those unmet needs despite these limitations, right? Some people just waste time, Talor. Like, some people are like, I'm on social media or TV or games, and I just go to like social. I got all these social plans, and are there ways to limit these activities? Maybe say no, right? So these are like important. It's an important facet of what we do, because like once you clear time from your schedule, now you've created the opportunity to really fulfill your unmet needs, right?
Yeah.
And it's an important thing to do. It's an important process to go through, but this process isn't something that requires years and years. It could really happen within, I think several days or several weeks time.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think, and with doctors, burnout is very rampant with doctors, right? And in many other professions as well. So trying to create that space, that time. Naval Ravikant, who I really like and follow, he says something like, "I want to have I want my calendar to be completely empty, but I always have something I'm working on or something I'm doing or something," right? So it's like having that. And these days I'm less and less impressed by people who are like, yeah, I work 80 hours a week or whatever. I'm like, why do you have to work so much, right? Like, if you're that successful, can't you create a business where, you don't have to work 70 hours a week, 60 hours a week, whatever it is? So yeah, just looking for these opportunities. But this has been really awesome, Chanu, as always. Really, really appreciate this. I think this is super important. I think highly recommend people go to mgiclinic.com, book a call with you, really go deep into this. If you're dealing with any kind of autoimmune disease, any kind of irritable bowel, gut issues, gut health problems. There's a lot of books been written recently about the mind-gut connection, which we just kind of spoke about in an indirect way just now on this podcast. And so you give people the supplements, the probiotics, the diet plans, the things of that nature, but you're also dealing with the mental aspect of things, which I think is so incredibly important. So highly recommend people check that out, and check you out on YouTube as well. Your videos are amazing, and just want to thank you for everything that you're doing.
Great. And thanks again for having me on. Hopefully next time we'll get some other guests on. We can really go deep on some of these topics. I would love to help interview these folks with you, alongside you. Really looking forward to that opportunity as well.
Would love to, man. Can't wait. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.